You have a couple presentations tonight, correct?
I do. I would like to introduce Ms. Kylie Linkos and Bridget Wilmot and the teachers as well for the blended learning presentation. Come on up, guys, come on
You
up.
guys could pull some of those extra chairs up, Bridget, whatever you need.
I'm going to scoot over.
Mr. Davis, I like the shirt. Thank you. I don't think it'll fit.
I don't think it'll fit her, but he is a very stylish, very well dressed all the time.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't know. Like almost like he said that like it was not.
No, I like the shirt.
And I'm like,
I don't think I could wear it to a board
I'm
meeting,
sure
but I
he's a
like the
snappy
shirt.
dresser.
Sure you could.
So we can do anything once, Cal. I'm excited for this. I'm talking blended learning and Bridget,
You might have to cut on
Bridget, did you go to the conference? Are you going to the
I was there yesterday and I'm going tomorrow.
Yeah.
They're on like a dedicated time. They gotta fit this in a certain amount of time.
Right. The only one you're holding up is me. I gotta go back to Schaumburg.
Bridget's.
Hi, everyone.
Who started, Bridget or Kyle?
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. So, hi everyone, I'm Bridget Wilmot, the Instructional Tech Coordinator, and I also teach one section, Honors English 10, Blended Learning. So, just to give you an overview of what blended learning is, essentially it's a combination of online face-to-face instruction. So a teacher designs a unit and they may designate certain days within the unit, depending on the student's needs, as flex days. So on those flex days, some students are allowed to leave the classroom. They can go to the library, they can go to the atrium to continue their studies online. While the students who are in the classroom are still working with the teacher through small group or individualized instruction. So the blended learning pilot, it gives a lot of freedom and a lot of choice to students. And then it also allows teachers to do a lot of differentiation, which is pretty amazing. So we asked students, because this is the first year that we're running this pilot in the fall, what they thought. We surveyed them. Response, overwhelmingly positive. 97% of the students said they thought we should continue on with the pilot. And then when we asked students, would you have chosen to take this class as a blended class or a traditional class? 90% of them said they would have chosen to take it as a blended class. So Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to her. She's going to talk about the student experience a little bit more, and she teaches AP Bio blended.
Hi, my name is Michelle Kaler. I've been teaching here for 16, 17 years now. But I thought I'd tell you a little bit about kind of why I chose to do it and then what I'm doing now and kind of where I see this going in the future. So initially I decided to apply for AP Bio to be part of the blended flex pilot to allow for better student engagement and differentiation in my AP Bio class. AP Bio has gone through many curriculum changes in the 16 years that I've been teaching it, and in the last few years, the biggest changes that I've seen have been more emphasis on inquiry and student lab design. I sum it up as students thinking and acting like scientists. This is one of the many reasons I decided to change my teaching style to a flipped classroom years ago. For those of you that don't know, a flipped classroom is an instructional strategy and a type of blending learning that reverses the traditional learning environment by delivering instructional content often online outside of the classroom, and it moves activities more so what would have been considered homework to inside of the classroom so that the teacher can focus more on where students are going wrong and kind of give a more individualized assessment and kind of help with them. So with class sizes on the higher end and utilizing all the lab space I would have in my classroom, I would have in the past 8 lab groups in each period with 3 or 4 students per group. And students would end up getting lost in the crowd, as I would say. They would be sitting back and letting other members of their group do the work for them. In the flexed approach, it allows me to focus more closely on student groups because now I have less students in the classroom. Normally I would have 3 or 4 lab groups with 3 individuals in those lab groups. And with fewer students, I could see that every single student was engaged. I could also hear many things going right and or wrong before it gets too late. So I can address misconceptions, I can address errors in lab design, or other things even from the other side of the room. In the past, with a very full classroom, I could not do that until it was too late when I'm looking at lab reports, and then I'm trying to jump back and correct things for them. Sorry. This is vital for me in the fact that now the students are going to be more hands-on. No student can get lost in the crowd anymore because in May, they are assessed on these lab activities that we're working with. So the fact that every student has to have now a hands-on approach definitely helps. One of the things that I do to set up my lab groups for the week is that my students are able to keep track of their daily assignments and activities on Schoology, and they also fill out a Flex Day reflection form. For me, it has to be turned in every Sunday, so I set up my lab groups. I use this form as a follow-up of who gets it and who doesn't. This formative assessment allows me to set up my groups and differentiate my instruction based on the needs of my students. So I will rearrange groups based on students who need a little bit more work. I'm going to keep them together and have their in-class time be structured a little bit differently than some of my other student groups. This works out really well because this is anonymous to other students in the class, and they aren't afraid to ask questions online that they're unsure about. The other thing I see this going for in the future, as we get closer to the AP exam, my student groups will be structured around different topics that those students feel like they need a little bit more help with in regards to review. Kevin Dybus, who teaches in the math department, is now going to discuss kind of the why in regards to this pilot and the feedback we've received.
Okay, welcome to me. Many people may ask why, as teachers, we took this risk to be part of this pilot. The teachers who are part of this pilot put a lot of time into this. For myself, and I know as well for others, we were really seeking an opportunity to leverage the technology that you guys invested in. We wanted to use that technology in a way that we could really differentiate the learning experience for the students. For me, personally, the greatest appeal was really being able to innovate my classroom in a way that helped build soft skills, such as prioritizing time, being accountable for your own work, and learning how and when to collaborate when left on your own. Those skills are the skills that I think are really going to prepare students for the college and post-college reality of being a modern learner. In the student survey that Bridget mentioned, 110 students opted to answer an open-ended question about what they liked about the program. Of those 110 students, 73 in some way mentioned the freedom and the choice that they were given. Students liked that they had a choice in the space in which they were learning, the pace at which they were able to learn, and the ability to prioritize their learning. When asked what exactly are you doing when you're out on those flex days, 60% of students noted that most of the time, or all of the time, they were working on the content that was for that course. So for instance, in my honors pre-calc course, if it's a flex day, 60% of those students are saying they're working on honors pre-calc. They also provided feedback as to what they were working on when they're not working on the content of the course. And the most common responses were that they were studying for another class, prioritizing homework a little bit differently, or had already completed the assignment for that day. The assignments never go uncompleted, so that 40% weren't working on it during that class period. They're still doing the homework. They're just doing it when the student is mentally prepared for that content. For instance, again, in my 7th hour blended pre-calc, 7th hour, we're mentally drained at that point. Many students may be exhausted because it's the end of the day. These flex days serve as a great opportunity for students to work on a different set of homework, something that's still engaging, but engaging in a different way, because math at the end of the day sometimes is just not what you want to be working on. Ultimately, that makes a better value for their time, because they can then say, you know, I'm going to work on reading this book now, and then when I'm in the mindset of math, I'll work on math. And you're going to get more out of it at that point. That's all I have to say. So I'm going to pass this over to Kathleen, who's going to talk on the rapport and relationship building that's possible due to blended learning.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Darcy. I'm an English teacher here. This is my 15th year teaching at RB, 17 years of teaching, and it's changed a whole lot while I've been in this career. I teach the co-taught English 10, which means I teach, I'm the content teacher, and then Mark Ori is the special education teacher. And then I teach AP language and composition. So, and that has been kind of my schedule for almost as long as I've been here, where I've had AP students and then, some form of co-taught students, or back in the day it was a loop, some, kind of bookending all kinds of learners in the building. And so I would say the common denominator for all of that is always relationships. And I know that's a little cliche coming from an English teacher, where we spend, a lot of our time in a poem and ideas, So I know that sometimes with technology, for myself personally, I as a teacher don't gravitate towards technology naturally. I need to make sure that I make a concerted and direct effort to do that, because the world is, moving beyond what just my inclinations are as a teacher. So I would say that the reason that sometimes I, as a teacher, push back against technology is that I fear, that it kind of erodes at relationships. But with flex learning, I have found that it really is the opposite, that it provides the opportunity to move past just sort of the banter that we're able to have with our students. It's a strength of, most teachers here in the building. But I have found that really that it's promoting academic language as well. And oftentimes with our students that typically don't feel comfortable talking in that kind of language. So my AP students, even if they don't necessarily know what they're saying, a lot of times they're good at student behaviors where they've learned to kind of parrot that language. In my co-taught class, I would say that there are kids like that, but oftentimes they struggle with that. And I would say that because the size of the room of who's in the room, and it's transient, depending on the week, it's not the same small group of students. But I would say that it's a smaller group. It's differentiated as far as the types of learners that are in the room. And then because there's two of us, it gives us the freedom also to check on the other students. That's kind of unique to the co-taught model, but that's also a strength as well. So it sort of feels like we are everywhere with them at all times. So that's been really nice too, because it doesn't feel like we're just pushing them out. It feels like we're able to rotate and sort of have a community that's built in our classroom and around the building. And just one last thing I wanted to say too, my experience with this is that Bridget's leadership with this truly, I think, is why so many of us have gotten on board with it. Her rapport just with us allows, because she's in the classroom still, that it allows us to not always be so great at it. So, after 17 years of teaching, I can do certain things without, rereading it. I can recite a few poems for you. Please don't ask me to do that right now. God, no, please don't. But, this kind of thing, I don't always feel comfortable not being great at something. I always want to be great at it. So because of Bridget's sort of relationship with all of us and in the building, her willingness to support us and sort of, encourage our sense of humor about this and sort of hold it all kind of lightly allows for, I think, sort of our own relationships and academic learning to grow as teachers, which then role models it to our students as well. So that's the thing that Mark and I have found frequently, is that we're actually narrating kind of what's going on, which then allows us to be human in front of them in sort of, an academic way that has been really enriching for all of us. So.
Great.
Yep.
And then we also have two of our members of the blended pilot. So Deirdre, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Deirdre Sullivan. I teach Spanish 2 blended first period, and we're really grateful for your support on the program, because it's been extremely valuable for our students, so thank you.
And then we also have Amy Phillips, who is our librarian, and she and the library staff are integral in providing a space for our students to go where they are supervised and can work. And then, of course, Kathleen mentioned Mark, her teaching partner. And then we also have Tom Dignan, who's in the English department, as well as Lori Sullivan and Melissa Carmona, who are in the science department. Okay. So on a somewhat related but not blended learning note, this is the handout that Kevin had asked me to pass out to everyone. So this is regarding the Bright Bites survey results. So this is a survey that we do every year, and it helps us see how technology is impacting student achievement. So if you take a look at the overview, you can see that schools get a score from 800 to 1300, an overall score, and then a score on 4 different domains, which are bulleted there: classroom use of tech, access, skills, and environment. So I always find it's a little bit easier if you get these numbers in context. So if you take a look down at the table below, you can see RB is at an 1116 overall score, which is advanced. It's a really strong, solid score. And if you look at the comparison to the numbers of the Illinois average and the national average, we are well above that. And then if you look too in each of the 4 domains, it's pretty exciting to see that we're above the Illinois average and the national average in all 4 of those domains. So this is the 4th year we've given this survey. Every year our score goes up and up and up, which is really exciting to see. So I think that score combined with what you heard from our blended learning pilot members, and then just all the work that our staff, all of our staff members here at RB are doing with integrating tech, it's really providing a pretty amazing educational experience for students.
Teacher, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Spanish. How's it working with blended? Because isn't like, I mean, like being in old school, when you take a foreign language, it's repetition, right?
Well, yeah, except, there's obviously some changes with ACTFL and what they expect, so it's not the drill and kill procedure that was always done in the traditional ways of learning a language. But like tomorrow, for instance, my students are working on a program called Flipgrid, and they have to give details about the last vacation that they went on with their family. And it's a wonderful program because it allows them to respond to each other through a video format. And anyway, so it's been wonderful. The other thing too is it allows for mastery within the assessments that we have. I've always given the students an opportunity to retake formative assessments, but not all of them will take advantage of it because it means them coming in on their time to relearn the topics with me, before or after school, and they have sports or they have other commitments. And what it does is it allows an opportunity for the students to come in then during the flex day where they're there anyway. If any of my students have a 75% or below, they have to be in the classroom with me anyway, because then it gives me a chance to work with them and make sure that they're where they need to be, like I said, to reach mastery and different topics that we're learning. So
So you've been doing this all year, correct?
All year, and I started out just having the students gone once a week. I'm rolling into twice a week. I had the opportunity to go to Huntley this past month. It was actually last week, and to view what they have, observe their campus because they've been doing it for so long. And then confer with their Spanish 2 and 3 and Spanish 4 teachers who also are practicing the same things. But again, the mastery of the subject matter is really critical because you encourage the students, but if they're not going to come in during their time after or before school, it's hard to confirm that they've understood the material. But now they have to be there, and they don't have a choice but to make sure that they gain an understanding.
Okay, great. Sorry, Gina.
Can I ask, how many classrooms are participating in the pilot?
We have 8 classes, 9 teachers. So approximately almost 200 students.
200 students. And teachers volunteered to take part?
Yes, this is your coalition of the willing here. Who was willing to put themselves out there and take a major risk because none of us knew where this program was going. So I have to say, these are brave teachers who want to do what's best for their students and said, okay, I'll try this and see how it goes.
So what would be next steps to expand?
Yeah, that was my
I knew that was your question.
Right, like you've
This is great.
Done site visits, and you continue to do site visits to see what others in the area are doing. You meet as a cohort to figure out what's working, what's not, right? Where do we see this going next?
Yeah.
And also, do we have any feedback from families, from parents? Because it's a little different. They might worry that concepts are not being taught in the traditional way that they are used to. Are parents feeling secure?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, I think the biggest issue for expansion for us is space. At some point, we need to find places to put the students when they're going out of the classroom. So right now, we have the library, we have the atrium, but if we expand, those spaces won't be able to accommodate those students anymore. So spaces, furniture, supervision, I think those are the major infrastructure. We've been really lucky with Kylie and the rest of the administration supporting the PD, so I feel like we've had a lot of opportunities to work together, go to conferences, and really have a chance to figure out this pilot. As far as parents, I haven't heard from any teachers that there has been any parent pushback. We sent a letter home to parents, and actually all the students in individual classes, they had to sign a contract and their parents had to sign a contract that outlined the expectations very clearly. We did have some parents who did not sign the contract, whether that's because the student just didn't want to return the contract. And of course, those students are still going through and having the same traditional classroom experience. They're getting all of the content, all of the material, they're just never leaving the class.
So if they didn't sign a contract, they stay with these teachers all 5 periods, like a traditional school does?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if they don't meet a minimum grade requirement, the cohort minimum is 75%, although some of us have it higher or have added other criteria. So if they don't meet that criteria, they're in the classroom as well. So really, students who are leaving are the ones who have shown that they can independently learn and do their assignments and do the soft skills that Kevin mentioned, like time management, organization, et cetera.
This might be a Kylie question. What would be the timeline if we wanted to expand this? When would we need to know that by?
So Kevin and Bridget and I have already been talking expansion and what that looks like and what are some of the requirements to allow more people into the pilot, and then also the idea of expanding sort of within the pilot. And we all feel really strongly that that has to be slow. What you're not getting out of these people, because they're not the kind of people that are going to tell you, is that the amount of work that it takes to get a blended class up and running is unfathomable to me. I'm talking about hundreds of hours of putting resources out for students to be able to access when they're not in the classroom. So for us to right now say to a staff member who's never done this, hey, do you want to try blended next year, would be next to impossible, in my opinion, because of the amount of work that they've put into it. We have talked about, in sort of our initial discussions about expansion, looking to potentially expand maybe a person within the pilot to have more than one class and see what that looks like. But when Bridget is talking about space, that's really our issue. With eight courses going a day, and Beth was kind enough to build the master schedule kind of around us so that there's one blended period. There's one blended class per period with the exception of second period. Since we have 8 classes, 7 periods a day, we had to double up there. We're talking about Amy making some pretty big changes within the library to allow us to have space in the library for our kids to go. You'll see the students out in the atrium sitting on the benches, which is their favorite place to be, I think, a lot of them. Beyond that, we don't have places for kids to go. We don't have a commons area like Huntley does. We don't have an open campus. So we are going to run into, as much as we want to expand, we are going to run into some fairly significant roadblocks with where do we put kids and who is supervising those kids. And that is really going to determine our ability to expand the pilot. We are excited about this. We're excited about the student feedback. I'm really excited about the work that this group of people is doing and the collaboration that I've seen from them and the willingness to take the risk. But we're going to meet a point where we kind of hit that wall, and it's going to be, okay, do we want to continue with blended? Do we value this enough to continue with it? Because as we get to that, it's going to require some financial commitment on our part. We're going to have to figure out who is going to supervise these kids, where are these kids going to go, what are they going to sit on, how is this going to function. We were able to do the pilot kind of limitedly, with our resources. Kristen was able to work with us to figure out some grant money so that we could kind of soup up the library a little bit. But we're going to reach a capacity where we have to say, kind of as a district, is this something we want to keep doing, and are we willing to finance some of what it would look like for us to keep doing that?
Would more flexible seating within your own classrooms be helpful for the space issue?
Kevin, you have kind of a flexy sort of space in your classroom with like that, well, like with your whiteboard and your collaboration space, but.
I don't think it would change the issue of having to have spaces where students could leave the classroom and go.
Is that a requirement? I don't.
I mean, in blended flex scheduling, that's the idea, is that during a class period, that's a flex class period on a flex day, that they not be in that classroom and be able to work sort of independently away from the group. I think if they were in the same classroom, even if there was flexible seating, you'd run into an issue of things like volume, where, you know, if you're trying to do, like I do a little mini lesson on a lot of the flexible days, if you have other students who are working on other things, that might involve them having conversations that could become disruptive.
Bridget, can I talk about my
Yeah,
experience?
yeah.
So, since I'm teaching AP Bio, I wanted to give all of my students the same experience and kind of going into the AP exam, since it is such a high stakes course. My 6th period is fully blended flex, so they have the ability to leave the classroom. My 3rd period, AP Bio, does not. And so I am modifying and still teaching on a blended flexed situation. In my room, it's a little bit easier, but it's still rather difficult. I have a lab classroom, so there's a demo desk in the middle and the lab tables and then kind of the traditional lecture area. But what I run into a ton is volume. It's loud, plus as I'm trying to do a mini lesson or go over homework, those kids in the, like, that have their flex time and should be working on stuff, they're hearing the answers. They're hearing me go through discussions and all that stuff, so it's not the full experience. And so it has been rather challenging to try to do that, but I'm still trying to keep both of those courses together.
So they come check in, and then they go to the library or cafeteria or wherever it might be?
So what I do is every Sunday I post my blended flex schedule for the week. I'll have 2 or 3 different groups. I'll call them just group A or group B or C. And they know for me, my 6th period, if they're going to the library, they don't have to check in. So they just leave their 5th period class and they'll go to the library. It's my job to check in skyward for attendance that those students who aren't in my room are showing up for the library, and they are. If they choose to go to the atrium, that's when they check in with me. And as I'm standing in the hallway during passing period, the students will come and say, Mrs. Kaler, I'm going to the atrium today. I'm on flex. And I'll just mark that down so that I know when I am doing attendance that they are present for the class day.
Would first period flex just stay at home and check in with you and then come in?
No, they
Seems
still have to check in with their teacher or the
Sketchy.
library.
Let's not encourage bad behavior.
But someone said it's something about open campus. I don't know who had said that.
Well,
Like
Huntley
what?
has.
So what does that mean?
That means kids can come and go. So like, some
They're
campuses are
doing
open, so like they get to go to McDonald's for lunch.
Right? Some have open lunch, some have open all day, right?
Right.
Those
It would be a
should
shame to not expand this program because of space. Like, right? Like, I'm
Absolutely.
curious if there's other districts that have
And
come
what
up with
they've
some
done,
innovative
right.
outside of the box ideas.
Well, like Huntley, when they
Such
took
as
me,
Wes's, go stay home.
when they took me, when Bridget, I went on the site visit with the group last year, and when Huntley redid their school, they had a couple commons areas, kind of like our atrium, but larger hallways, or
It's beautiful out
off the
there.
beaten path, like staircase, where they can just put some tables and chairs,
I've seen that.
a couple couches and things like that. You know,
We have, I mean, there are certainly, I'm the creep who like goes around the school and is like, oh, we could put some chairs in this stairwell, like we have some
Some
places,
crates.
right? Like we could certainly, you know, expand some spaces with what we have, but we would have to consider like, right, the furniture, what are the kids sitting on, making sure that we have security. If I told Dave, I could feel Dave Mann looking at me right now saying that I'm gonna let kids go into stairwells. We would have to, you know, we would really have to rethink what that looks like. But, you know, when you walk down the halls of Huntley, I mean, one, they're big enough to drive a car down, first
Sure.
of all. But you see students in hallways,
Yes.
right, with benches
Yes.
and cafe-style tables and seating.
Yes.
And there are sort of kids everywhere you go in that building. And it has a very kind of commonsy college campus sort of
Yeah,
feel
it's like
to
you're
it.
at the student center at college, right?
21st century.
I do think, though, that's also a huge cultural shift for
Yes.
RB. So when
Sure.
we talk about that, and we talk about a slow expansion, that would need a lot of
Yes.
time, I think, to take hold, where we as a building would have to decide, do we feel comfortable with that? And also for the open campus, I just want to say Huntley they're very, very open and transparent about the pros and the cons. And actually, when our last group was out there, they have decided to start rolling back their open campus and not giving students as much
It's a lot of
freedom.
liability.
Yeah, and keeping them in the building. So, you know, I really look to them of the lessons they've learned, and they're starting to realize that perhaps they didn't want students to have that much freedom, and maybe it's better if they're in
So is it
the
just
building.
that there's a lack of space in the library?
Well, there is a thing of I don't have quite enough chairs for as many students who want to come into the library at any given period. Also, those chairs are fairly old and falling apart. When you sit in them, they kind of creak. So there is that. We're also looking at when I've met with some people about new furniture and redesigning the library a little bit, about how we can see all the students for supervision. We have lots of tall shelves in our nonfiction area, and one of the drawings that they submitted to me had shelves that were probably about 4.5 or 5 feet tall instead of 7, so we can see over them, and also then moving them. If you've been into the library, there's a little back corner where it's a little hard to see, and students like to hang out over there. So even moving some of the shelving there so it becomes less of a hangout space. More of a storage or library space. And then also using, I've moved a temporary desk for myself over into the far side of the library to help with supervision as well. We're just having some growing pains, I guess, in the students who are in study hall, where that has been their space, getting some more visitors and some more people in there. It's becoming a much louder space than maybe your high school library was, but to me that signals collaboration and students learning how to use their own time in the way that they feel is more productive.
So I guess one last question I have, is there a distraction then? Because if students are kind of free to roam around, for other kids who are in the classroom trying to learn, and then they see people kind of walking the halls, or...
So I asked Neil Dugetti periodically, and the most recent time that I asked him, I said, because that was kind of our concern, right? Like kids roaming around the building, that's why we very intentionally scheduled one period a day, or one period at a time. And I said, have you had, issues, and has the noise been crazy, or have you had discipline issues? And he said, if you hadn't told me there was a blended flex pilot going on, we would have no idea. So kudos to the students and the teachers really too for making the expectations very stringent, because it really is a one time and you're out type of situation, and the students have really honored and respected what is expected of them, and we have not seen, people tell me a lot of things that go wrong, and so I feel like no one would really be afraid to come by and say like, hey, why are you doing this? It's making me crazy. We've had nothing but positive. And if kids are talking about blended, they're talking about it because they want to be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, when students go to their location, they are stuck at that location. So they aren't allowed to go wander throughout the halls at all.
So if we had multiple locations though, do you need, like this year I see, we do a pretty good job, just administrators, teachers walk through the hall. I know any blended kid's got the orange lanyard.
Yep.
Like I said, make it a point to kind of just check in and see what they're doing, and they are on task. There's been a couple occasions where I've stopped either on the stairs. they might be laying down and I thought they were like sleeping for a second, but we're on task. But if we did, so we had atrium, and if we created like a study lounge in the alumni lounge, you're talking maybe multiple supervisors, right?
Potentially.
Okay.
Right, we know that if we give kids meaningful work, and like the survey that Kevin talked about, right? Like they recognize the freedom and the voice and the choice, and they respect that. And I think they rise to the occasion. 99% of them are going to rise to the occasion, right? Like they're going to do what it is that they need to do to be successful, right? So.
Yeah, Mr. Dybus, you I think used the term the modern learner.
Yes.
And it's very clear to me, based on your presentation and also having heard of the flipped classrooms, what you're engaging in is modern teaching. So I certainly very much appreciate that. I appreciate your courage in trying something new, accepting the commitment to putting the additional time in. So the word culture was used too. Maybe this requires culture. This is something we're starting to talk about. And so thank you for your presentation. I think it's very impressive.
We'll talk more, Bridget.
Sounds great.
Figure out some things.
I just wanted to add one more thing for the board about Bright Bites. It's free. It is a very expensive tool. West 40 pays for it. The data that you get from it is phenomenal. and Bridget uses it well to improve teaching and learning as far as the technology is concerned.
Well, maybe more, Kylie. I'm not giving you an answer tonight. I see you
You know
staring.
I'm gonna come see you
Yeah, I see you staring. I'm deflecting right now. Are you teaching a class on blended or something with Northwestern?
Oh, I'm got hired to teach an online pre-calc through Northwestern for high school students just across America that are gifted. So it's a totally online course.
Fantastic.
Congratulations, nice job.
Congratulations.
We overheard that today in a different meeting we were in, so.
Oh, well,
And I'm excited
that's scary.
for how that's going to inform some of this too, right?
Yeah, I think it will definitely help
yes.
mold this even better.
Yes, absolutely.
Good job,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bridget, nice job. That's two things. You brought the one-to-one down the path, and now you're doing this, so keep up the good work. Keep up the good work. Omar, are you just hanging around today to watch the board meeting, or what's going on here?
You wanna hang out?
So this is the longest I've seen our students stay.
I know.
Very excited. I think they wanted to talk about blended learning.
They wanted to hear about
Are
it.
they in blended learning?
I don't think any of them, are you, any of you in blended learning? I don't think so.
No, I'm fine. Like, I'm in Miss Kaler's third period by
Oh, so you can't
Oh,
leave.
it's,
So it's like, we can hear the library period, like, there's like 6 people who get passed to go.
Yeah.
But I like it, it's
Yeah.
nice. I approve.
So you're just hanging out tonight, watching a movie?
Hanging out.
Or watching a meeting, not the movie, you're watching the meeting?
Yeah, we have one more comment then, but then.
Okay, all right.
Okay. I texted